Welcome to the Time2Fly Podcast. It's time to give your business wings and take flight to achieve more impact, influence, and income with unique perspectives, tools, and tips from successful entrepreneurs and business professionals to help your business fly. Here to educate, encourage, and entertain you with their own unique perspectives and experience, plus sharing anecdotes of growing up as cowgirls. Here's your host, Jill Fleming.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Time to Fly, Give Your Business Wings. I'm your host, Jill Fleming, and today we're going to be discussing the phenomenon known as imposter syndrome. Before doing the podcast today, I did some research and found some really intriguing articles about imposter syndrome, as I believe it is something that as business owners and professionals, it's not quote unquote an actual and named psychological disorder, but it is something that I think a lot of us actually struggle with. Some of the research that I found, according to an article in Fast Company, many high achievers share a dirty little secret. Deep down, they feel like complete frauds and that their accomplishments are the result of just sheer luck. And imposter syndrome reflects a belief that you are an inadequate and incompetent failure, despite evidence that indicates you're skilled and quite successful. So that statement right there, I think, is something that we all struggle with from time to time as business owners. When you're running a business, there is kind of that entrepreneurial roller coaster, no matter how big or how small your business. And I think even as professionals, the ups and downs of careers can get us down on ourselves, and we don't step out and really take advantage of opportunities that come our way that we don't feel we deserve or that we're not quite qualified for. So I did some additional research as well, and according to Psychology Today, imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon in which people are unable to internalize their accomplishment. The Fast Company article I found goes on to call imposter syndrome a reflection of a belief that you're inadequate and incompetent despite evidence that indicates you're skilled and quite successful. So if you've ever been to a business conference or through a professional development course or even a leadership event, you've probably no doubt heard about imposter syndrome. It is talked about amongst many of the key reasons that people have for lack of confidence and feeling like they're a fraud. It's often not defined or clarified of actually being called imposter syndrome, but it's needing to know how to deal with it. According to Psychology Today, imposter syndrome is a psychological term referring to a pattern of behavior where people doubt their accomplishments and have a persistent, often internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Not an actual disorder, the term was coined by clinical psychologists Pauline Clancy and Suzanne Imes in 1978, so a little over 40 years ago. They found that despite having adequate external evidence of accomplishment, people with imposter syndrome remained convinced that they didn't deserve the success that they have. Those that struggle with imposter syndrome called their success luck or good timing and dismissed it as others believing they were better, more intelligent, and more competent than they actually were. And while yes, early research from those psychologists' work focused on high-achieving women, the syndrome has actually been found to impact men and women in roughly equal numbers. So we all suffer from it. I've known some of the most senior executive men who struggle with it day in and day out. There's managers who are running billion-dollar companies, speakers who command audiences in the thousands, and powerful men who still wonder if they are doing a good enough job. And yes, it impacts us as women every day too. You know how it goes. You get the promotion at work, and your inner narrative comes out and is that they just must be short on candidates, or your business has a great win and you tell yourself that it was sheer chance that the client found you and they must not have looked too far and wide. Or you're getting ready to give a presentation and you secretly think that you're about to be found out how really uneducated about a topic you really are, even though oftentimes you're the most experienced person in the room. That thought process can be completely derailing. So from the research that was published in Psychology Today, they know that imposter syndrome is a large part a reaction to certain circumstances or situations. So while you may feel fully confident speaking to a group of more junior people, addressing your peers would completely undo you. Or you could be fine at work, but having to speak up at a local school meeting, forget about it. Further research found, according to Dr. Valerie Young, who has a book called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, Why Capable People Suffer from the Imposter Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It. Young did decades of research studying fraudulent feelings among high achievers. She discovered that there are actually 5 subgroups of the imposter syndrome. Number 1 is the perfectionist. Perfectionism and imposter syndrome often go hand in hand. Perfectionists set excessively high goals for themselves, and when they fail to reach a goal, they experience major self-doubt and worry about measuring up. Whether they realize it or not, this group can also be control freaks, feeling like if they want something done right, they have to do it themselves. So it gave a couple of questions to ask yourself if you're not sure if it applies to you. Questions to ask yourself are, have you ever been accused of being a micromanager? Do you ever have great difficulty delegating? Even when you're able to do so, do you feel frustrated and disappointed in the results? When you miss the insanely high mark on something, do you accuse yourself of not being cut out for your job and ruminate on it for days? And do you feel like your work must be 100% perfect 100% of the time? For this type, the perfectionist, success is rarely satisfying because they believe they could have done even better. But that's neither productive nor healthy. Owning and celebrating achievements is essential if you want to avoid burnout, find contentment, and cultivate self-confidence. So learn to take your mistakes in stride, viewing them as a natural part of the process. In addition, push yourself to act before you're ready. Force yourself to start the project you've been planning for months. Truth is, there will never be a perfect time, and your work will never be 100% flawless. The sooner you're able to accept that, the better off you'll be. And a term that I always say is done is better than perfect, and you just have to set sail. You can sit there at the dock all of your life tied up and never take your boat out and set sail. So break away from the dock, untie, and set sail because done is better than perfect. The second type of subgroup is called the superwoman or superman. Since people who experience this phenomenon are convinced they're phonies among real deal colleagues, they often push themselves to work harder and harder to measure up. But this is just a false cover-up for their insecurities, and the work overload may harm not only their mental health, but also their relationships with others. Some questions to ask yourself if you want to see if this applies to you is, do you stay later at the office than the rest of your team, even past the point that you've completed the day's necessary work? Do you get stressed out when you're not working and find downtime completely wasteful? Have you let your hobbies and passions fall by the wayside, sacrificed to work? Do you feel like you haven't truly earned your title despite numerous degrees and achievements, so you feel pressed to work harder and longer than those around you to prove your worth? Imposter workaholics are actually addicted to the validation that comes from working, not to the work itself. Start training yourself to veer away from external validation. No one should have more power to make you feel good about yourself than you. On the flip side, learn to take constructive criticism seriously, not personally. As you become more attuned to internal validation and are able to nurture your inner confidence that states you're competent and skilled, you'll be able to ease off the gas as you gauge how much work is reasonable. So with that, we're going to take a quick break for our sponsors, and we will come back with the other subgroups of imposter syndrome.
This episode is sponsored by the book Freedom to Fly, the visionary leader's guide to unlocking your unique freedom code to confidently create more impact, influence, and income. Get your copy of this best-selling book on Amazon.com.
And we're back. Today we're talking about imposter syndrome, and before the break, we went through the definition of what imposter syndrome is. And then we are going through some subgroups according to Dr. Valerie Young from her book, The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, Why Capable People Suffer from the Imposter Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It. So she actually discovered 5 different subgroups of imposter syndrome, and I'm going through and outlining those for you to see if you fall into any of those groups. This book was actually written for women, but according to Psychology Today, it's an equal amount of struggle between both males and females. So we're all in the same boat. On to the subgroups. The third subgroup of imposter syndrome is the natural genius. Dr. Young says many people with this competence type believe they need to be a natural genius. As such, they judge their competence based on ease and speed as opposed to their efforts. So in other words, if they take a long time to master something, they feel shame about it. These type of imposters set their internal bar impossibly high, just like perfectionists. But natural genius types don't just judge themselves based on ridiculous expectations, they also judge themselves based on getting things right on the first try. When they're not able to do something quickly or fluently, their alarm sounds. So if you're not sure this applies to you, here are some questions to ask yourself. Do you have a track record of getting straight A's or gold stars in everything you do? Were you told frequently as a child that you were the smart one in your family or peer group? Do you dislike the idea of having a mentor because you can handle things on your own? When you're faced with a setback, does your confidence tumble because not performing well provokes a feeling of shame? And do you often avoid challenges because it's so uncomfortable to try something you're not great at? So Dr. Young says to move past this, try seeing yourself as a work in progress. Accomplishing great things involves lifelong learning and skill building for everyone, even the most confident people. Rather than beating yourself up when you don't reach your impossibly high standards, identify specific, changeable behaviors that you can improve over time. For example, if you want to have more impact at the office, it's much more productive to focus on honing your presentation skills than swearing off speaking up in a meeting as something you're just not good at. The fourth subgroup is the soloist. Sufferers who feel as though asking for help reveals their phoniness are what Dr. Young calls soloists. It's okay to be independent, but not to the extent that you refuse assistance so that you can prove your worth. Not sure if this applies to you? Then you can ask yourself these questions. Do you firmly feel that you need to accomplish things on your own? I don't need anyone's help. Does that sound like you? Do you frame requests in terms of the requirements of the project rather than your needs as a person? So for me, I think in the past, I would have fallen into the soloist. I've gotten much better over time of all of the leadership work and development that I've done personally of being willing to ask for help and being willing to receive help. So I think in the area of imposter syndrome, this would be an area that I have struggled with in the past and probably still struggle with to an extent, but I know I'm much better. A term that I use for this one is the power of the ask, because if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So I have learned to be willing to ask for help because sometimes a little leg up and a little help can help you be much more productive and get things done much quicker. And being willing to ask for help from people who are better at things and knowing that it takes a village and a team to really make things go round and not be the soloist and the lone wolf. So the fifth and final group is the expert. Experts measure their competence based on what and how much they know or can do, believing they will never know enough, and they fear being exposed as inexperienced or unknowledgeable. Some questions to ask yourself. Do you shy away from applying to a job posting unless you meet every single educational requirement? Are you constantly seeking out trainings or certifications because you think you need to improve your skills in order to succeed? Even if you've been in your role for some time, can you relate to feeling like you still don't know enough? And do you shudder when someone says that you're an expert? It's true that there's always more to learn. Striving to bulk up your skill set can certainly help you make strides professionally and keep you competitive in the job market. But taken too far, the tendency to endlessly seek out more information can actually be a form of procrastination. Start practicing just-in-time learning. This means acquiring a skill when you need it. For example, if your responsibilities change, rather than hoarding knowledge for false comfort, realize there's no shame in asking for help when you need it. If you don't know how to do something, ask a coworker. If you can't figure out how to solve a problem, seek advice from a supportive supervisor or even a career coach. Mentoring junior colleagues or volunteering can be a great way to discover your inner expert. When you share what you know, it not only benefits others, but also helps you heal your fraudulent feelings. No matter the specific role, if you struggle with confidence, you're far from alone. To take one example from Dr. Young, studies suggest that 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their career. So if you've experienced it at any point in your business or in your career, you've at one point or another chalked up your accomplishments to chance, charm, connections, or another external factor. How unfair and unkind is that? So take today as your opportunity to start accepting and embracing your capabilities. Perhaps the most limiting part of dealing with imposter syndrome is that it can limit our courage to go after new opportunities. explore potential areas of interest, and put ourselves out there in a meaningful way. So when I work with my clients who experience imposter syndrome, there are a number of things I suggest that significantly help them move forward and deal with those fraudulent feelings. Voicing their fears in the coaching that we do, or a safe peer group, helps as it normalizes the feelings and ensures them that they're not alone. I also encourage them to write down lists of their achievements and have those in a place that they're easily accessible. I call it the win list of skills and successes to demonstrate that they really do have concrete value to share with the world. Another thing that I recommend with clients that I work with is to keep a list of testimonials that they can read on those really hard days to refill that depleted feeling that they may be having of really having a lack of confidence and feeling unsure of themselves. Reading through those testimonials from past clients and people you've worked with can refill that self-confidence bank, and it's actually true evidence instead of the imposter thinking that can come in and is actually false evidence appearing real, which is fear. Also, it's really good to have a strong support system of peers and friends that you can get ongoing feedback from that can help to validate your efforts and outcome, and really just surround yourself with your own cheering squad. And if you don't have a coach or a mentor, to really surround yourself with a really strong peer group. At the end of the day, remember this: you are here for a reason. In this job, in your business, your life, you are worthy. You are better than you think you are smarter than you think you are, and you know more than you give yourself credit for. Remember that. And remind yourself as often as you need to. Create a win list, create a testimonial list, keep it in front of you so that you can always refer back to it whenever those imposter thinking thoughts start sneaking in, because it's time to fly and give your business wings.
A big thank you to this episode's sponsor, Time2Fly, the visionary leader's guide to unlocking your unique freedom code to confidently create more impact, influence, and income. Get your copy of this best-selling book on Amazon.com.
Join our flock. Stay informed of all things Time to Fly by subscribing to our newsletter at Time2Fly Podcast.com. And be sure to tune in to our next show.